The sharp crack of gunfire split the morning air as Katherine Turner dove behind the water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd been in Willow Creek barely an hour, and already someone was trying to kill her. So much for starting fresh. The bullet splintered wood just inches from her head, sending splinters flying. Katherine clutched her satchel tighter to her chest, knowing full well why they were shooting. The rumors had followed her all the way from Santa Fe. "You can't hide forever, Turner," a gruff voice called out. "We know what you did." Katherine closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. 3 years running, and her past was still nipping at her heels like a determined coyote. She hadn't stolen that money, she'd been framed by the very man she'd trusted most. But no one ever believed a woman's word over a wealthy banker's. Step away from the lady. The new voice was calm, steady as stone, cutting through the tension like a knife. Katherine peered around the edge of the trough to see a tall figure silhouetted against the morning sun. His stance was relaxed but alert, hand hovering near the pistol at his hip. The broad brim of his hat cast shadows across his face, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble. "This ain't your business, Lawson," the gunman spat. "This woman's a thief and a liar. Got a warrant out for her in 3 territories. Don't recall appointing you Sheriff Jenkins," the stranger Lawson replied evenly. "Now lower that gun before I decide to practice my draw." Something in his tone made Jenkins hesitate. After a tense moment, the man lowered his weapon with a curse. "Your funeral, Wade. Everyone knows she can't be trusted." The tall stranger, Wade, tilted his head slightly. His voice carried across the dusty street, loud enough for everyone gathered to hear. "Then trust me to love her anyway." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. What kind of fool would say such a thing about a woman he'd never met? Yet something in his confident stance made her heart skip a beat. Jenkins shook his head in disgust before backing away. "You'll regret this, Lawson. Mark my words." Only when Jenkins and his companions had retreated did the stranger approach, boots crunching on the hard, packed dirt. He crouched down beside the water trough, and Katherine got her first good look at him. His eyes were a startling blue against sun-bronzed skin, and a scar traced a thin line along his left temple. "Lucas Wade," he said, offering his hand. "Seems like you've made quite an entrance, miss." "Katherine Turner," she replied cautiously, ignoring his outstretched hand. "And I didn't ask for your help." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, madam, you surely didn't. But in my experience, a lady taking cover from flying bullets generally appreciates it all the same." Despite herself, Katherine felt a reluctant smile forming. "Thank you, Mr. Wade, but you shouldn't have gotten involved. Those men won't forget what you said." "Which part?" He stood and offered his hand again, this time to help her up. "You know which part," she said, finally accepting his assistance. His palm was calloused but warm against hers. "That nonsense about trusting you to love me. Are you mad or just foolish?" Lucas Wade's smile widened. "Folks around here would probably say both, but I've found that sometimes the best way to stop a bully is to say something so unexpected it knocks the wind right out of their sails." Katherine brushed the dust from her skirts, studying him. "Well, it worked, but now everyone in town will think. They'll think whatever they want regardless," he interrupted. "People always do. Question is, what's your plan now? Jenkins and his boys won't stay away for long." Katherine glanced down the street where curious onlookers were already whispering behind their hands. Her reputation had preceded her, it seemed. "I had planned to catch the next stage west, but it doesn't leave until tomorrow morning." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "You'll need somewhere safe to stay tonight. My sister runs the boarding house at the edge of town. Clara's not one for gossip, and she makes the best apple pie this side of the Mississippi." Katherine hesitated. Her instinct was to refuse. Trusting strangers had never ended well for her. But she was tired, hungry, and out of options. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "True enough," Lucas agreed, gesturing for her to walk alongside him. "But I know Jenkins and his type. Been dealing with men like him my whole life, men who think having money and power gives them the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't." As they walked down the main street of Willow Creek, Katherine felt the weight of dozens of stares. "They're all watching us," she murmured. "Let them watch," Lucas replied, tipping his hat to an elderly couple who quickly averted their gaze. "Gives them something to talk about besides the drought." "I'm not what they think I am," Katherine said suddenly, surprising herself with the admission. "What they say I did, it's not true." Lucas didn't break stride. Figured as much. A real thief wouldn't look so offended at being called one. "You believe me, just like that?" He shrugged those broad shoulders. "I believe in forming my own opinions, and I've got a knack for spotting liars comes from playing too much poker." They reached a modest two-story building at the end of the street. A hand-painted sign hung above the porch. "Wade Boarding House, clean beds, hot meals." "Your sister's place?" Katherine asked. Lucas nodded, holding the door open for her. "Home sweet home, at least when I'm not out with the cattle. Been helping my sister run it since her husband passed 2 years ago." The interior was simple but spotlessly clean. Polished wooden floors gleamed beneath a scatter of woven rugs, and the air smelled of fresh bread and coffee. A slender woman with the same striking blue eyes as Lucas emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Luke, there you are. Mrs. Henderson was asking about." She stopped short when she spotted Katherine. "I didn't realize you were bringing company." "Clara, this is Miss Katherine Turner. She needs a room for the night." Something in the way he said it made his sister's eyebrows rise. "Miss Turner," Clara said with a polite nod. "You're welcome to stay, of course. We have a lovely room at the back of the house. Very quiet." "Thank you," Katherine replied, already feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. "I appreciate your hospitality, especially given the circumstances." Clara's gaze flicked between Katherine and her brother. "Luke has a habit of collecting strays, people and animals alike." There was affection in her voice, but also a note of wariness. "Will you be joining us for supper, Miss Turner? It's beef stew tonight." "Yes, please, and it's just Katherine, if you don't mind." Clara smiled, the expression warming her face. "Katherine it is." "Luke, show her to the blue room while I finish in the kitchen." Lucas led Katherine up a narrow staircase to a small but comfortable-looking bedroom. A patchwork quilt covered the bed, and white curtains framed a window overlooking a vegetable garden. "It's not fancy," he said, setting her satchel on a wooden chair, "but it's clean and no one will bother you here." Katherine ran her fingers over the quilt, suddenly overwhelmed by the simple kindness of these strangers. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Wade?" He leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those piercing blue eyes. "Lucas, please, and I told you I don't like bullies." "There's more to it than that." A shadow crossed his face. "Maybe so. Let's just say I know what it's like to be judged unfairly." He straightened up. "Rest a while." "Supper's at 6, and Katherine," she looked up. "Yes. Whatever trouble you're running from, you're safe here tonight." After he left, Katherine sank onto the bed, exhaustion finally catching up to her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax, if only a little. Tomorrow she would be on the stage heading west, away from this town and the handsome cowboy with the too trusting heart. It was better that way, safer for both of them. But as she drifted off to sleep, his words echoed in her mind. "Then trust me to love her anyway." Foolish words from a foolish man. But somehow, they were the most beautiful words she'd heard in years. Katherine woke to the sound of voices drifting up from downstairs, one of them raised in anger. She recognized Jenkins' gravelly tone immediately and froze, straining to hear. "Harboring a criminal, Wade. That woman's wanted for stealing $5,000 from the First Bank of Santa Fe. I've got the poster right here." "And I'm telling you," came Lucas's measured response, "that any guest of this boarding house deserves basic courtesy. If you have a legitimate warrant, take it to Sheriff Daniels." "The sheriff's out tracking those rustlers," Jenkins countered. "I'm acting as deputy in his absence." "Since when?" Lucas's voice had an edge now. "Since I own half this town, including the mortgage on this place." There was a long silence, and Katherine's stomach twisted with guilt. She hadn't meant to bring trouble to these kind people. Quickly, She gathered her few belongings and changed into her traveling clothes, a practical dark blue skirt and white blouse. She could slip out the back way, perhaps catch a ride with a passing wagon instead of waiting for the morning stage. She was halfway down the back stairs when Clara appeared at the bottom, arms folded. "Going somewhere?" she asked quietly. Katherine clutched her satchel tighter. "I'm sorry. I can't bring more trouble to your door. That man Jenkins, he's threatened your home because of me." Clara's expression softened slightly. "Jenkins has been looking for reasons to foreclose on us since my husband died. You're just his latest excuse." She hesitated, then added, "Luke told me a little about your situation. Is it true what they're saying?" Katherine met her gaze steadily. "No, I was a teller at the bank in Santa Fe. The head banker, Mr. Blackwood, was embezzling funds and framed me when the discrepancies were discovered. I was engaged to his son at the time." She swallowed hard. "He believed his father over me." Clara studied her for a long moment. "Come help me with supper. The back door will still be there after we eat." Surprised by the offer, Katherine followed Clara to the kitchen, where she was put to work peeling potatoes. Through the window, she could see Lucas chopping wood in the yard, his powerful strokes splitting logs with practiced ease. His shirt clung to his back, damp with sweat despite the cooling evening air. "He's always been like that," Clara remarked, catching Katherine's gaze, "taking the weight of the world on his shoulders, especially since—" She trailed off. "Since what?" Katherine asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Clara sighed, kneading bread dough with flour-dusted hands. "Since the war. Luke joined up with the Union cavalry when he was just 18, came back different, quieter, started standing up for every underdog and lost cause he came across." She glanced at Katherine. "No offense intended, none taken," Katherine replied. "I suppose I am something of a lost cause at this point." "Perhaps," Clara said, her tone softening, "or perhaps you just need someone to believe in you for a change." Before Katherine could respond, the back door opened and Lucas stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of fresh air and pine. He stopped short at the sight of Katherine in his sister's kitchen, sleeves rolled up and hands wet from washing vegetables. "I see Clara's put you to work already," he said with a smile that reached his eyes. "She's not one to let idle hands stay that way for long." "Your sister has been very kind," Katherine replied, suddenly self-conscious under his steady gaze. "Jenkins is gone for now," Lucas informed them, washing his hands at the pump. "But he'll be back, probably with reinforcements. Katherine, is there anyone who can vouch for your innocence? Anyone who might have evidence?" Katherine shook her head. "The only person who knew the truth was the bank owner's secretary, Martha Gaines. She saw him doctoring the books the night before he accused me, but she was too afraid to speak up. He threatened her family." Lucas dried his hands, his expression thoughtful. "And where is this Martha now?" "I don't know. Still in Santa Fe, I imagine." "Why?" He exchanged a look with his sister. "Just thinking out loud." "Clara, is Tom Parker still working the telegraph office?" Clara nodded. "Until 8 tonight. What are you planning, Luke?" Lucas reached for his hat. "Nothing reckless. Just making inquiries." "Katherine, would you write down the full name of this banker and his secretary? And the exact date of the theft you were accused of?" Bewildered but hopeful, Katherine quickly wrote the information on a scrap of paper. Lucas tucked it into his pocket and headed for the door. "Don't wait supper for me," he called over his shoulder, "and keep the doors locked." After he left, Katherine turned to Clara. "What is he doing?" The older woman smiled enigmatically. "What Lucas does best, finding the truth." She handed Katherine a stack of plates. "Now help me set the table." "The stew won't serve itself." Despite Clara's reassurances, Katherine couldn't help but worry as the evening wore on. Lucas hadn't returned by the time they finished their meal, and the shadows grew long across the garden. She helped Clara with the dishes, straining to hear every sound from outside. "He'll be fine," Clara said, noting her anxiety. "My brother's more capable than most men twice his size." "It's not his safety I'm worried about," Katherine admitted. "It's what he might discover. What if he learns things about me that make him think less of you?" Clara finished for her. Luke's not a man to turn his back on someone because of their past. We all have secrets we'd rather keep buried. Even you, Katherine asked, surprised by the shadow that crossed the other woman's face. Especially me, Clara replied softly. I wasn't always the respectable widow running a boarding house, you know. Before I met my Henry, I worked in a saloon in Dodge City. Not as a well, not just serving drinks, if you take my meaning. Katherine's eyes widened. I would never have guessed. Clara's laugh was tinged with remembered pain. That was the idea. When Henry brought me here as his bride, we let people think I came from back east. Only Luke knew the truth, and he never once judged me for it. She squeezed Katherine's hand. The past shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Clara tensed, reaching for the shotgun mounted above the kitchen entrance. "Who's there?" she called. "It's me," came Lucas's voice, "and I'm not alone." Clara unlocked the door to reveal Lucas standing on the porch beside a middle-aged man in a dusty suit. The stranger clutched a leather satchel and looked as if he'd ridden hard. "Katherine," Lucas said, "this is James Wilson, attorney at law from Santa Fe. He arrived on the evening train." "Mr. Wilson, this is Miss Katherine Turner." The attorney stepped forward, extending his hand. "Miss Turner, I've been looking for you for quite some time." Katherine backed away, confusion and fear mingling in her chest. "Are you here to arrest me?" "Quite the contrary," Wilson replied, setting his satchel on the table. "I'm here to clear your name. May I?" At Clara's nod, he opened the satchel and removed several documents. 3 months ago, Martha Gaines came to my office with evidence of Edward Blackwood's embezzlement ledgers, correspondence, even a signed confession she'd managed to obtain. Katherine's heart pounded so hard she feared it might burst from her chest. "Martha testified against him," Wilson nodded. "She did more than that. She had been secretly keeping copies of the doctored ledgers for months, suspecting Blackwood's activities. When he framed you, she knew she had to act, but she was terrified for her family. It took her some time to gather the courage and the evidence." "What happened to Blackwood?" Katherine asked, hardly daring to hope. "He's awaiting trial in Santa Fe. His son Richard was implicated as well. It seems he knew about his father's activities all along." Wilson produced another document. "This is an official statement clearing you of all charges, signed by the territorial judge. And this," he handed her a bank draft, "is compensation for damages to your reputation, paid from Blackwood's seized assets." Katherine stared at the paper in her hand. $5,000, the exact amount she'd been accused of stealing. Tears blurred her vision. "I don't understand. How did you find me?" Wilson glanced at Lucas. "I didn't. Mr. Wade here contacted an old Army friend who works at the Santa Fe newspaper. When he described your situation, his friend directed him to me. I was already planning to search this region based on reports that you'd been heading west. The telegram just expedited my journey." Katherine turned to Lucas, who stood quietly by the door. "You did all this for a stranger?" His smile was gentle. "You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Katherine." Later, after Wilson had been shown to a guest room and Clara had retired for the night, Katherine found Lucas sitting alone on the porch swing. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. She sat beside him, leaving a respectable distance between them. "Thank you," she said simply. "I've been running for so long, I'd forgotten what it feels like to hope." Lucas gazed out at the darkened garden. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Some of us even need a third or fourth." "Jenkins said some things while I was upstairs," Katherine ventured carefully, "about your past." Lucas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Jenkins likes to remind folks that I wasn't always welcome in polite society. After the war, I had a hard time adjusting, drank too much, got into fights. Killed a man in self-defense during a poker game in Wichita." He looked at her directly. "I served 2 years in prison for it. That's why I understood what it meant to be judged by your worst mistake." Katherine absorbed this information, studying his profile in the moonlight. "Is that why you said what you did?" About trusting you to love me, a flush crept up his neck. Partly. Mostly I was just trying to throw Jenkins off balance. He paused. Though I can't say I found the idea particularly objectionable. Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. Mr. Wilson says I'm free to go anywhere now, start fresh with no shadow hanging over me. And where will you go? Lucas asked quietly. I don't know, she admitted. I never thought past running, never dared to dream of a real future. Lucas's hand found hers on the swing between them, his touch tentative. Willow Creek's not such a bad place to put down roots. Once folks get to know you, the real you, they'll come around. Katherine looked down at their joined hands. And what if I'm not who you think I am? What if I disappoint you? Then I'll be disappointed, he said simply. But I'd rather risk that than wonder what might have been if you'd stayed. The honesty in his voice touched something deep within her, a place she'd thought long frozen by betrayal and loneliness. Slowly, she leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. I think, she said softly, I might stay, at least for a little while. His arm came around her shoulders, drawing her closer. That's all I'm asking for, a little while to show you what life could be like here. Together they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead, the future stretching before them like an unwritten page. The next morning, Katherine awoke to the sound of raised voices again, but this time they were accompanied by the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. She hurried to dress, her heart in her throat as she made her way downstairs. In the front parlor, she found a tense standoff. Jenkins and two other men faced Lucas and Mr. Wilson. Clara stood to one side, the shotgun from the kitchen held steadily in her hands. Miss Turner, Jenkins sneered when he spotted her. Just the criminal we've come to collect. Mr. Wilson stepped forward, documents in hand. As I've been explaining to these gentlemen, Miss Turner has been fully exonerated. I have the papers right here, signed by Judge Hollister himself. Jenkins scoffed. Convenient forgeries, no doubt. I assure you they are genuine, Wilson replied stiffly. And unless you wish to find yourself facing charges of attempted kidnapping and false imprisonment, I suggest you lower your weapons immediately. One of Jenkins' companions, a wiry man with a patchy beard, shifted uncomfortably. Hank, maybe we should. Shut up, Dawson, Jenkins snapped. This woman is coming with us, papers or no papers. There's still a reward being offered by the Blackwood family. The Blackwoods are in no position to offer rewards, Wilson countered. Their assets have been frozen pending the outcome of the trial. Any poster you may have seen is null and void. Katherine stepped forward. Mr. Jenkins, I understand you believe you're doing the right thing. But I am innocent of the charges against me. Edward Blackwood framed me to cover his own crimes. Jenkins wavered, his gun hand lowering slightly. Why should I believe you? Because I'm telling you the truth, she replied simply. And because Mr. Wilson has traveled all the way from Santa Fe to clear my name. Would he do that for a common thief? The standoff might have ended there if not for the sudden arrival of a horse and rider outside. The door burst open to reveal a young man with a familiar face that made Katherine's blood run cold. Richard, she whispered. Richard Blackwood, her former fiancé, stood in the doorway, his once handsome face now haggard and bitter. Katherine, I've been tracking you for weeks. Lucas moved to stand between them. You're not welcome here, stranger. Richard ignored him, his gaze fixed on Katherine. Did you think you could ruin my family and simply disappear? My father is in prison because of you. Your father is in prison because he stole from the bank and framed me for it, Katherine replied, finding strength in the truth she'd been denied for so long. And you knew it, Richard. You knew what he'd done and you let me take the blame. I was protecting my family. You were protecting your inheritance, she corrected, feeling Lucas's steady presence beside her. You never loved me, I was just a convenient scapegoat. Richard's hand moved to his gun. You've always had a silver tongue, Katherine. It won't save you this time. Everything happened at once. Richard drew his pistol, Jenkins shouted, and Lucas lunged forward. A shot rang out, but it was Clara who had fired, the blast from her shotgun splintering the doorframe inches from Richard's head. "The next one goes lower," Clara warned, the barrel unwavering. In the moment of shock that followed, the sheriff of Willow Creek finally arrived, drawn by the commotion. Sheriff Daniels was a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense demeanor that commanded instant respect. After examining Mr. Wilson's documents and hearing all sides of the story, he placed Richard Blackwood under arrest for attempted assault and threatening a citizen. "As for you, Jenkins," the sheriff added, "I don't recall deputizing you or anyone else while I was gone. Try it again and you'll be joining Mr. Blackwood in my jail." As Richard was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Katherine with naked hatred. "This isn't over." "Yes," she replied steadily, "it is." When the sheriff had departed with his prisoner and Jenkins and his men had skulked away, an exhausted silence fell over the boarding house. Mr. Wilson excused himself to send telegrams confirming Richard's arrest, leaving Katherine alone with Lucas and Clara. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked, his eyes searching her face. Katherine nodded, though her hands still trembled slightly. "I never thought I'd see Richard again. I always believed that if he knew the truth, he would." She trailed off, the last of her illusions about her former fiancé finally shattered. "Love doesn't turn its back when things get difficult," Lucas said quietly. "Real love stands firm." Clara cleared her throat. "I'll put some coffee on. I think we could all use a cup after that excitement." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving them alone in the parlor. Lucas took Katherine's hands in his. "You were very brave just now." "I didn't feel brave," she admitted. "I felt terrified, but also free. For the first time in years, I could speak the truth without fear." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "Freedom suits you, Katherine Turner." Something shifted between them in that moment, a current of possibility that made her breath catch. Without overthinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a brief, tender kiss. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide with surprise and something warmer. "What was that for?" he asked, his voice husky. "For believing in me when no one else would," she replied. "For giving me a chance at a new beginning." His smile was slow and beautiful. "Does this mean you're staying in Willow Creek?" Katherine pretended to consider the question. "I suppose I could be persuaded. I hear the boarding house has excellent rates." Lucas laughed, the sound warming her from within. "The owner's sister might be willing to negotiate terms," he teased, drawing her closer. "Though I should warn you, she drives a hard bargain." "I think I can handle her," Katherine murmured as his lips found hers again. And for the first time in 3 long years, Katherine Turner stopped running and started to believe in the possibility of home. Over the following weeks, Willow Creek gradually adjusted to the truth about Katherine Turner. Mr. Wilson had returned to Santa Fe, but not before making sure her story was properly reported in the local newspaper. Some townsfolk remained suspicious, but many others, particularly the women who frequented Clara's weekly quilting circle, welcomed her with cautious warmth. Katherine found work at the town's small library, cataloging books and reading to the children on Saturday mornings. The position didn't pay much, but combined with the compensation from Blackwood's assets, she had enough to rent a small cottage not far from the Wade boarding house. Lucas visited often, bringing freshly cut flowers or books he thought she might enjoy. Their courtship was unhurried, each of them taking time to heal old wounds while discovering the joy of building something new together. One crisp autumn evening, nearly 3 months after her arrival in Willow Creek, Lucas invited her for a ride to his favorite spot in the nearby hills. They set out as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the golden prairie grass. "Where exactly are we going?" Katherine asked as they followed a narrow trail up a gentle slope. "Patience," Lucas replied with a mysterious smile. "We're almost there." The trail opened onto a small plateau overlooking the entire valley. Willow Creek lay below them, smoke rising from chimneys as families prepared their evening meals. Beyond the town, the river wound like a silver ribbon through the landscape, catching the last rays of the setting sun. "It's beautiful," Katherine breathed, dismounting from her horse. Lucas tied both horses to a nearby tree and joined her at the edge of the plateau. "I found this place after I returned from prison. When the weight of people's judgment became too heavy, I'd come up here to remember that the world is bigger than one town's opinion." Katherine slipped her hand into his. "Thank you for sharing it with me." They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in vivid streaks of orange and purple. Lucas seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous, a state she'd rarely seen him in. "Katherine," he finally said, turning to face her, "these past months have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she replied softly. He took both her hands in his. "I know it hasn't been long and some might say we're rushing. But I think when you've lived through what we have, you learn to recognize what matters." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "This belonged to my mother. My father carved the box himself." Katherine's heart began to race as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "I'm not a wealthy man," Lucas continued, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I can't offer you mansions or fine carriages. But I can promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to believe in you when others doubt, and to love you with everything I am." He dropped to one knee on the rocky ground. "Katherine Turner, will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Lucas weighed. His smile could have outshone the sunset as he slid the ring onto her finger and rose to take her in his arms. Their kiss was a promise, sealed against the backdrop of the darkening sky and the first evening stars. "They'll talk, you know," Katherine murmured against his chest afterward. "They'll say you're a fool for trusting me, that I've somehow tricked you." Lucas's laugh rumbled through her. "Let them talk. I meant what I said that first day. If they say you can't be trusted, then they can trust me to love you anyway, and I'll keep proving them wrong for the rest of our lives." As they rode back to town in the gathering dusk, Katherine felt a sense of peace she'd thought forever lost to her. The ring on her finger caught the last light of day, a tangible symbol of the second chance she'd been given, not just at clearing her name, but at finding a love strong enough to withstand both their pasts. The news of their engagement spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Clara was ecstatic, immediately beginning plans for a small ceremony at the boarding house. Even Jenkins grudgingly offered congratulations when he encountered Lucas at the general store, though Katherine suspected Clara's shotgun had something to do with his sudden change of heart. As the wedding day approached, Katherine received an unexpected letter from Santa Fe. Martha Gaines wrote to inform her that Edward Blackwood had been sentenced to 15 years in prison, while Richard had received 5 years for his role in the embezzlement. The letter concluded with an invitation for Katherine to return to her old position at the bank, which was now under new management. She showed the letter to Lucas that evening as they sat on the porch swing of her cottage. "Are you tempted?" he asked after reading it. "To go back, I mean." "To show everyone there that you've been vindicated," Katherine considered the question. "A part of me is, the part that spent 3 years dreaming of the day I could walk down those streets with my head held high." She leaned against his shoulder. "But I've found something better here. Something worth more than vindication." His arm tightened around her. "We could visit someday if you wanted. After we're married, I've never seen Santa Fe." "I'd like that," she agreed, "but not right away. I want to focus on our beginning, not my past." 2 weeks later, on a perfect spring morning, Katherine Turner became Katherine Wade in a simple ceremony in the garden behind the boarding house. Clara had transformed the space with wildflowers and white ribbons, and it seemed the entire town had turned out to witness the union. Katherine wore a dress of ivory silk that Clara had helped her make, with tiny pearls sewn into the bodice to match her engagement ring. Lucas could scarcely take his eyes off her as she walked toward him on the arm of Sheriff Daniels, who had agreed to give her away. "Dearly beloved," began the preacher, his voice carrying across the hushed garden. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other the courage to trust, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to love despite all obstacles." As they exchanged their vows, Katherine looked into Lucas's clear blue eyes and saw not just the man she loved, but the future they would build together, a future founded on truth and trust, where neither of them would have to face life's storms alone. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Lucas cupped her face in his hands with infinite tenderness before claiming her lips in a kiss that sealed their promises to one another. The gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause, led by an enthusiastic Clara, who had tears streaming down her face. At the reception that followed, even the most skeptical townspeople seemed won over by the obvious joy radiating from the newlyweds. Old Mrs. Abernathy, who had initially been among Catherine's harshest critics, pressed a handmade quilt into her hands. "Every bride needs something to keep her warm on winter nights," the elderly woman said with a wink that made Katherine blush. "Though I suspect you won't need much help in that department." As the afternoon wore on, Lucas led his bride in their first dance beneath the apple tree in full bloom, white petals occasionally drifting down around them like fragrant snow. "Happy, Mrs. Wade," he murmured against her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, melting into his embrace as they swayed to the fiddle music. "Though I must admit, I'm looking forward to having you all to myself." His eyes darkened at her words. "The feeling is entirely mutual." Later that evening, after the last guests had departed, and Clara had shooed them off with knowing smiles, Lucas carried Katherine across the threshold of their new home, a small ranch house on the outskirts of town that they had spent weeks preparing. It was modest but solidly built, with large windows that caught the western light and a wide front porch perfect for summer evenings. Inside, Lucas had arranged a surprise. Every surface was covered with candles, their golden light transforming the simple rooms into something magical. A bottle of champagne chilled in a bucket and flower petals created a path to the bedroom. "When did you do all this?" Katherine asked, amazed. "I had help," Lucas admitted. "Clara and some of the ladies from the quilting circle, they're quite the conspirators when it comes to romance." Katherine turned in his arms, overwhelmed by the love she felt for this man who had restored her faith in human goodness. "I don't deserve you, Lucas Wade." He shook his head, tracing the curve of her cheek with his fingertips. "You deserve everything good in this world, Katherine. And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again." Their kiss deepened, years of loneliness and hardship melting away in the warmth of their shared passion. That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their bodies expressing what words could not: the profound gratitude of two souls who had found harbor after weathering separate storms. In the quiet afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets with moonlight spilling across their bed, Katherine rested her head on her husband's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I used to dream of this," she confessed softly. "Not just being safe, but being truly known, accepted, loved." Lucas's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "And I used to dream of finding someone who could see past what I'd done to who I really am." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "We found each other against all odds. Do you believe in fate?" She asked, watching the play of shadows on the ceiling. He considered the question. "I believe that life gives us moments of choice crossroads where we can turn toward bitterness or hope. I'm grateful every day that you chose to stop at the Willow Creek station and that I chose to step between you and Jenkins' gun." Such small decisions, Katherine marveled, yet they changed everything. As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Katherine realized that for the first time in years, she was not afraid of tomorrow. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, the former outcast and the woman who couldn't be trusted, building a life on the foundation of a love strong enough to defy everyone's expectations. The year that followed their wedding was one of growth and occasional challenges. Lucas continued his work with the cattle, partnering with a neighboring rancher to expand their herds. Katherine divided her time between the library and helping Clara with the boarding house, which was flourishing under their combined efforts. In early spring, Katherine discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Lucas with a mixture of joy and trepidation. "A father," he said wonderingly, his hand resting on her still flat stomach as they lay in bed one evening. "I never thought I'd have the chance." "You'll be wonderful at it," Katherine assured him, covering his hand with her own. "You have so much love to give." As her pregnancy progressed, Katherine blossomed. The last shadows of her difficult past seemed to recede as she focused on the future growing within her. The women of Willow Creek, now firmly in her corner, showered her with baby clothes and advice, some welcome and some less so. "If you carry low, it's a boy," Mrs. Abernathy insisted during a quilting session. "High means a girl, and you're definitely carrying high," Clara rolled her eyes. "Pay no attention, Katherine. Abernathy said the same thing about my Henry, and he was most definitely not a girl." The summer heat was at its peak when Katherine went into labor, 2 weeks earlier than expected. Lucas was out checking the herd's water supply when Clara sent the ranch hand racing to fetch him. By the time he thundered into the yard, leaping from his horse before it had fully stopped, Katherine's pains were coming fast and strong. The midwife shooed him from the bedroom with firm instructions to boil water and then stay out of the way. For 6 agonizing hours, Lucas paced the length of their small home, wincing at each cry that escaped from behind the closed door. Clara brought him coffee and reassurance in equal measure. "Women have been doing this since Eve," she reminded him. "Katherine is strong." Just as the sun was setting, casting long golden rays through the windows, a new cry pierced the air, the indignant wail of a newborn taking their first breath. Lucas froze mid-pace, his heart hammering against his ribs. The bedroom door opened and the midwife emerged, her lined face wreathed in smiles despite her exhaustion. "Congratulations, Mr. Wade. You have a daughter, a beautiful, healthy little girl." Lucas felt his knees weaken. "And Katherine." "Tired but well. She's asking for you." He entered the bedroom on unsteady legs to find his wife propped against the pillows, her face flushed and damp with sweat but radiant with a joy he'd never seen before. In her arms lay a tiny bundle wrapped in the softest blanket Clara had been able to find. "Come meet your daughter," Katherine said softly. Lucas approached the bed and carefully sat beside her. Katherine tilted the bundle so he could see the perfect, tiny face of their child, red and wrinkled, with a dusting of dark hair plastered to her head. "She's so small," he whispered, afraid to touch her. "But strong," Katherine replied. "Feel how tightly she grips." She guided his finger into the baby's palm, and those miniature fingers closed around it with surprising strength. Lucas felt tears spring to his eyes. "She's perfect." "You're perfect. I love you both so much it hurts." Katherine leaned against him, exhaustion evident in the droop of her shoulders. "What shall we call her?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to meet their child first. Looking at her now, Lucas knew immediately. "Hope," he said. "Hope Clara Wade." Katherine's smile was luminous. "It's perfect." Little Hope grew quickly, bringing a new dimension of joy to their lives. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, evident from the moment she learned to crawl, and immediately set about exploring every corner of their home. On Hope's first birthday, they hosted a small celebration in their garden. As Lucas watched his daughter tottering between guests on unsteady legs, occasionally falling but always getting back up, he felt a contentment he'd never thought possible. Katherine came to stand beside him, slipping her arm around his waist. "Penny for your thoughts, husband." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Just counting my blessings, and thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't been in town that day. Or if I hadn't stopped in Willow Creek," she added. "Sometimes I think about all the places I might have ended up, running from a crime I didn't commit. And instead you found a home." "I found you," she corrected. "Home is wherever you and Hope are." That evening, after their guests had departed and Hope was sleeping soundly in her crib, Lucas and Katherine sat on their porch swing, watching the stars emerge one by one in the deepening blue of the sky. "I received a letter from Martha today," Katherine said, her head resting on his shoulder. "Edward Blackwood died in prison last month, heart failure." Lucas tightened his arm around her. "How do you feel about that?" She considered the question. "I thought I might feel vindicated or at least some sense of justice being served, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad that he wasted his life on greed and deception, and that his son followed the same path, and Richard, still serving his sentence. Martha says he's been writing letters to the governor seeking clemency. Apparently he claims to have been unduly influenced by his father." Lucas snorted. "A convenient excuse." "Yes," Katherine agreed, "but I find I don't care as much anymore. They're part of a life that feels increasingly distant, like something that happened to someone else." They fell silent, the rhythmic creaking of the swing the only sound besides the chirping of crickets and the occasional distant lowing of cattle. Finally, Katherine straightened, turning to face her husband with an expression that immediately caught his attention. "I have news," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Good news, I hope." "The very best kind," she replied, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "Hope is going to be a big sister come spring." Joy exploded through Lucas like a sunrise. He pulled Katherine onto his lap, covering her face with kisses until she laughed and pushed him away. "Careful, you'll wake Hope with all this commotion." "Let her wake," he said, grinning like a fool. "I want the whole world to know how happy I am." As if on cue, a sleepy cry emerged from inside the house. Katherine shook her head fondly. "Your daughter has excellent timing. You can tell her your good news while I make us some tea." Lucas went to fetch their daughter, bringing her back to the porch wrapped in her blanket. Hope's eyelids were heavy with sleep, but she snuggled contentedly against her father's chest as he resumed his place on the swing. "Listen carefully, little one," he whispered, rocking gently. "I have an important secret to share. Soon you'll have a brother or sister to play with." "What do you think of that?" Hope's only response was a sleepy sigh, but Lucas continued anyway, painting pictures of the future for his drowsing daughter, a future where their family would grow, where love would multiply rather than divide, where trust would always overcome suspicion. Katherine returned with the tea to find them both asleep on the swing, Hope curled against Lucas's chest like a small, warm cat. The sight filled her heart to overflowing. This was what second chances looked like, she thought. Not just redemption or vindication, but the opportunity to build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been lost. Careful not to wake them, she settled beside her husband and daughter, content to watch over their sleep as the moon rose high above Willow Creek, casting its gentle light on the home they had created together, a home founded on the simple, revolutionary idea that love could thrive even where trust had been broken, that faith in one another could overcome any obstacle, that sometimes the heart sees truths that remain hidden to the skeptical eye. And in that moment, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that Lucas had been right on that very first day. When they said she couldn't be trusted, his decision to trust her anyway had changed not just her life, but the lives of everyone their love had touched. 5 years later, the Wade Ranch had grown substantially. With hard work and careful investment of Katherine's compensation money, Lucas had acquired additional grazing land and expanded their herd. Their modest house had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family. Hope, now 6, had been joined by her brother Liam, 4, and their youngest, Emma, just turning 2, on a warm summer evening as the family gathered on their expanded porch for supper. A rider approached down the long drive. Katherine shaded her eyes against the setting sun, trying to make out the visitor. "Who is it, Mama?" Hope asked, climbing onto the porch railing for a better view despite her father's admonishment to be careful. "I'm not sure, darling," Katherine replied, though something about the rider's posture seemed vaguely familiar. Lucas stood, his hand instinctively moving to where his gun would have been in earlier days, though he rarely carried it now. "Stay with the children," he told Katherine quietly. "I'll see what they want." As the rider drew closer, Katherine gasped in recognition. "It's Richard," she said, her voice barely audible. Lucas's expression hardened. "Richard Blackwood, he should still be in prison." "His sentence was 5 years," Katherine reminded him. "He would have been released by now." Lucas positioned himself at the bottom of the porch steps, a physical barrier between the approaching rider and his family. Katherine gathered the children behind her, though hope, curious as always, peeked around her skirts. Richard Blackwood dismounted at a respectful distance. The years had not been kind to him. Prison had thinned his once handsome face and added streaks of gray to his dark hair. He looked older than his 36 years. "Katherine," he called, removing his hat. "Lucas." "What do you want, Blackwood?" Lucas demanded, his voice level but cold. Richard held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Just to talk. I'm not here to cause trouble." Katherine stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Lucas's arm. "It's all right," she said quietly. "Let's hear what he has to say." Lucas didn't move from his protective stance, but he nodded shortly. "Say your piece, then." Richard's gaze moved from Lucas to Katherine, then to the children watching with wide eyes from the porch. "You have a beautiful family," he said, his voice rough with an emotion Katherine couldn't quite identify. I'm glad you found happiness." "Is that what you came to say?" Lucas asked. Richard shook his head. "No, I came to apologize." He looked directly at Katherine now. "What my father and I did to you was unforgivable. I've had 5 years to think about it, to realize how completely I failed as a man and as the person who claimed to love you." Katherine felt Lucas's muscles tense beneath her hand. "Why now?" she asked Richard. "After all this time?" "Because I couldn't move forward with my life until I'd acknowledged the wrong I'd done," he replied simply. "I don't expect forgiveness, Katherine. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret my cowardice." A complicated mix of emotions washed through Katherine: old pain, faded anger, and a surprising amount of pity for the broken man before her. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I'm heading to California," Richard answered. "Starting fresh where no one knows the Blackwood name or what it's come to represent." He hesitated, then added, "I heard about my father's death. I'm sorry I wasn't there." "You were where he put you," Katherine said softly. An awkward silence fell, broken by Hope's clear voice from the porch. "Mama, who is that man? Why is he sad?" Katherine exchanged a glance with Lucas, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "This is Mr. Blackwood," she told her daughter. "Someone I knew a long time ago." Hope, never one to be constrained by adult notions of propriety, skipped down the steps past her father. "I'm Hope Wade," she announced, extending her small hand as she'd been taught. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance." Richard looked startled, then deeply moved as he carefully shook the child's hand. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Wade. You look very much like your mother." "That's what everyone says," Hope agreed cheerfully. "But Papa says I have his stubborn streak." A ghost of a smile touched Richard's lips. "I'd say that's accurate." Lucas finally relaxed his stance slightly. "You're welcome to stay for supper, Blackwood. It's a long ride to the next town." The invitation clearly surprised both Richard and Katherine. "I wouldn't want to impose," Richard said. "It's not an imposition," Katherine found herself saying. "We have plenty." And so Richard Blackwood joined the Wade family for supper on their porch, an unexpected epilogue to a chapter of Katherine's life she had long considered closed. The conversation was stilted at first, but the children's natural curiosity and Emma's determined efforts to feed Richard pieces of her cornbread gradually eased the tension. As twilight deepened into dusk and lanterns were lit, Lucas recounted stories of the ranch's growth, while Katherine spoke of her work with the town library, which had expanded under her guidance. Richard listened more than he spoke, his eyes occasionally reflecting a profound regret for the life he might have shared with Katherine had he made different choices. When the meal was finished and the children were put to bed with extra stories to satisfy their excitement over the unusual visitor, Richard prepared to leave. "Thank you," he said, standing by his horse. "For the meal and for allowing me to see that good can come from even the worst mistakes." Katherine studied the man she had once thought she would marry. The bitter anger she had carried for so long had faded, replaced by something approaching compassion. "I hope you find what you're looking for in California, Richard." He nodded, his gaze moving to Lucas, who stood with his arm around Katherine's waist. "You were right, Wade, that day in town when you said you'd trust yourself to love her anyway. I should have been the one to stand by her, but I lacked your courage." "It wasn't courage," Lucas replied, "just common sense. Katherine Turner was the best thing that ever happened to me." Richard mounted his horse. "Take care of each other," he said, and with a final nod he rode away into the gathering darkness. They watched until he was out of sight, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the night. Katherine leaned against her husband's solid warmth. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked. "Yes," she said, and meant it. "It's strange. For so long I thought seeing him again would reopen all those old wounds, but instead it feels like the final piece of healing I didn't know I needed." Lucas turned her to face him, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You've always had more capacity for forgiveness than most." "I learned from the best," she replied, stretching up to kiss him. "A very wise cowboy once taught me that trust and love can overcome even the deepest betrayals." Later that night, with their children sleeping peacefully and the house quiet around them, Katherine and Lucas lay in each other's arms, discussing the unexpected visit. "Do you think he'll find peace?" Katherine wondered. Lucas considered the question. "I hope so. Everyone deserves a second chance. We're living proof of that." Katherine traced the familiar lines of her husband's face in the moonlight streaming through their window. "You know, when I first arrived in Willow Creek, I never imagined I'd be here now, with this life, these children, this love." "No regrets?" Lucas asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not a single one," she assured him. "Every step, every hardship led me here to you. How could I regret any of it?" His smile was tender as he pulled her closer. "Then trust me to love you anyway," he whispered, echoing the words that had changed both their lives all those years ago. "Always," Katherine promised, sealing her vow with a kiss as deep and true as their enduring love. Outside their window, a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the night sky, a fleeting reminder that even in the vast wilderness of chance and circumstance, two hearts had found each other against all odds, creating a love story that would be told in Willow Creek for generations to come.